Is there anything you would like to mention from the that you didn't mention in the last interview?
Well, um, I would like to just bring up one event that was pretty important in our lives, which was the Coconut Grove fire in Boston, the nightclub. And I realized that that was a very a changing point for many of the clubs in Boston, or local organizations, or stores. The change was from the fire was to make sure that all doors opened out when they were leaving the club on the front part of the building, because during the fire many people bodies were piled up next to that outgoing door, and that was because the door opened the opposite way. And again, we at that point lots of changes were made in all the doors, shopping malls. If there wasn't a shopping mall, I shouldn't say the malls were not there at the point that this fire was. I really can't even remember the date of the fire, but I think it was in December, maybe around Christmas Eve, or maybe 1941. Do you remember the date?
No, I don't.
But I think that was about the time it was.
But
so, yeah,
it did affect all of our lives a lot.
Yeah.
Changed. In fact, isn't there a requirement today that
Yeah.
all public places should have doors that swing out so you won't.
And every time today we walk through one of them, one of us will say, "This is all due to the Coconut Grove," because it was such a horror story that we heard that many people died in that fire. And it was right around Christmas, and there were military men in there. So I'm sure that it probably was the beginning of World War II. But, it affected us a great deal, even though we weren't old enough to go to a lot of the clubs that were in Boston. It really was something that we all talked about. I can't really remember any other great event. Oh, the 1938 hurricane. And of course, both of us experienced. Cynthia did it in her way, and I did it in my way. I happened to be in Rockland. My father was a businessman at that time and owned a dealership in Rockland, and it was an afternoon in early September, well, mid-September. I think it was September 21, but I'm not really sure of that date, 1938. And I think I was around 7 or 8 years old. But I had been playing outdoors after I had been to school that day, and my mother, the wind came up very strong, and my mother was very aware of the weather. To her, weather was an extremely important part of life. So she tripped her over to where I was playing outside with a group of kids and said, "I think you better come in now, the wind is so strong." And so I went into the house with my mother, and the wind began to blow harder and harder, and she said, "We best go to your father's garage," which was practically not next door, but practically next door, but just a very short walk. And we stood there with the doors, the large front door of the garage wide open. My father had said, "We best keep the circulation here good, because the wind has really come up." It was the afternoon, I believe around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. By 5 o'clock, the wind was whipping. I don't know what it was up to, but over 100 miles an hour. And it was one of the most frightening things to be there and hear the roar of this wind. If you've never been in a real hurricane, you can't imagine the whistling of that wind around the corners of a building if you're in the building. So it was tremendous. When we went outside, the street we lived on in Rockland was lined with these gorgeous, gorgeous elm trees, as every area in the state of Massachusetts had really done a great job planting these trees, probably 40 or 50 or 100 years before the hurricane had come by. And every tree up and down the street was over. And these trees were, 50 to 100 feet high, gorgeous elms. And of course, it was weeks before we ever got the electricity back or telephones. But that was a defining moment in my childhood, I believe. After experiencing that, I keep saying I never want to go through another hurricane like that in my life, because it was so harrowing.
Well, we weren't used to having hurricanes around here. Nobody then alive had experienced a hurricane, and we did just the opposite thing. We didn't know what was going on, so my brother and we thought it was great fun to go outdoors and run around under the swaying trees. And there was a little banking that we had in the yard there, and we could hold our arms and be blown down the banking. And we all thought it was just fun and games, which it was certainly far from being.
Terrified.
Yeah. So, in Marshfield Hills, which is lined at my main street of Marshfield Hills, had the most beautiful elm trees anywhere around here. And the hurricane brought them all down so that they looked like pickup sticks along the road. And every tree went between what is now the post office and Hall's Corner. And that devastated us. We were very sad about that.
Also, we should mention the fact the tidal wave that happened down at Buzzards Bay and Onset. There was a tidal wave connected to the hurricane, which came in, and actually the tide was coming in. Tide was going out also with the wind. The wind was blowing from the southwest, southeast, I guess it was. And on the beginning of a hurricane, there are 6 hours, takes about a hurricane to reach its full force. And for 6 hours it blew from the southeast, and then it began to turn, and it blew from the northwest after the hurricane had really devastated an area. And during this, the tidal wave at Buzzards Bay, which has a very small outlet to this huge bay, I'm not sure how you'd explain exactly what happened there, but it was the tide, I believe, was the tide that was going out that caused the wave to grow so high. But as it came in anyway, the tidal wave came into the bay, just spread out and went devastatingly over the land for probably, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 miles, taking down many of the cottages that were there. They were very small cottages in the area. And of course, no one was in them because people didn't live in those summer colonies at that particular time. So the loss of life was not high. It was the loss of the property. But I can remember as a child riding down there after the tidal wave, just looking at it would be an area that was probably at least 3 or 4 times the size of anything that exists at Brant Rock or Ocean Bluff today. But it's really a very devastating thing that happened to that whole area.
So did that happen in 1938?
That was the same hurricane.
So then how was the community, because you had mentioned this earlier where your family lived, how was the community affected by the Brant Rock fire in 41?
In 41? Well, of course, we lost a cottage in 41 in the fire. It's completely flattened, burned just like that. And I happened to stand with my parents in 1941, probably about 10 years old, over on Webster Street and watched the cottage burn. And as the fire moved, and standing there, you could see the ocean. You could see Brant Rock. You could see Ocean Bluff. And you could see the fire moving along. And every once in a while, there'd be this huge explosion, and it would be another cottage that was just going up like that. And of course, the community at that particular time was devastated by the loss of property, but there was no loss of life, and which was probably, it's very good that it happened in September and not in August, because you probably would have had loss of life that would have been tremendous. And at that particular time, what they did of the town of Marshfield after the fire was to bring to town meeting all sorts of rules and regulations on outdoor fires and all sorts of things. We lost the property we gave it to the town really for rezoning, because it needed to be rezoned, which they did. They increased certain property rules and regulations that the town fathers felt were important. And another little thing I'd like to mention, our friend Joan Scarpinetti, who is really a great person. She loved history, the history of Marshfield. She was a summer resident, and she was leaving with her parents. And as she got in the car, down to Fieldston, and turned the corner of where Ocean Street turns, Joni said the car ahead of her, she saw them throw a cigarette out, and of the car, a lighted cigarette. And as certain kids would perhaps look for somebody that was smoking, that impressed her. So when she got home, one of the things they felt started the fire was a lighted cigarette from a car. So Joni claimed to always see the beginning of the Ocean Bluff fire, but it was stopped. The wind died down just about, I think, around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And when the wind died down, the fire went flat down and stopped right. I've forgotten the street it stopped.
Samoset Street.
Samoset Street. It stopped right there. Otherwise, if the wind hadn't stopped, it would have gone all the way to Cut River and the old Green Harbor River, I'm sure, because there was nothing to stop it except the wet marsh that was out there.
So, just to clarify, as far as like the demographics go, did most people who own the small cottages in Marshfield during the summers, they were relatively close by? Like, you lived in Rocklands, Joni lived in.
She lived in Jamaica Plain.
Jamaica Plain,
yeah.
But it wasn't like you were traveling from across the country per se.
No.
It was people, because I assume, drove down from Rockland
Yeah.
to come see the fire.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, we were actually probably notified by my grandfather, who was living in Marshfield at that particular time. He always lived in Marshfield, and I'm sure this was our second loss. We lost the first house, which was my grandmother's house that she inherited from her relatives, which is a very large Victorian house. That was located at Fieldston, and that was lost during the blizzard of 1898. And that house was a great loss to the family, because it was such a large house. It was right on the waterfront in Fieldston, and that ended up in Green Harbor. It was swept. The house was swept away, crumbled on its way across the marsh and ended up in Green Harbor. So it was our second loss. The second cottage was something my grandfather had built for my grandmother because she had hay fever, did not want to live in North Marshfield in the summer. So she took her younger son and moved to Ocean Bluff. Actually, the Ocean Bluff fire should be the name of the fire, not the Brant Rock fire, because it didn't involve Brant Rock other than it was in the same vicinity. But should have always be called the Ocean Bluff. But of course, the newspapers in those days, Brant Rock was a big summer colony. It was the one that people from Abington, Whitman, Brockton, Rockland, all went to in the summer for vacations and owned property there. It was common for people living in the outlying towns to own a cottage at Ocean Bluff and Brant Rock. It was just a very teeming place. There were hotels there. I think that probably there were at least 3 or 4 major hotels and plenty of rooming houses there. So it was a very wonderful place. They had wonderful concerts, band concerts, all the time at Brant Rock. And there was a bowling alley. There was a movie theater. It was a great place. Not much of a beach because the beach would change with the seasons coming and going. The rocks would come in, the rocks would go out one year, the next year. But it wasn't much of a beach, but people loved it because it was cool in the summer, and they'd go down just Sunday school picnics from churches. There was a great love of going down there with your Sunday school class and celebrating just summer in Brant Rock. Just one afternoon was all that many people got to go to the beach. But, and of course, there was a stagecoach that came from the railroad station. And that was a very important thing that happened to Marshfield.
Well, while some people were beaching and spending the summers here, others of us lived here year-round and had other experiences. One in being a summer experience and a timely thing, which was the existence of a Girl Scout day camp by the name of Wysaibo. And so some of us that happened to be here just loved Wysaibo. And it was run by the Hatch family, one of the leading families in the town. They,
oh, there goes a fox.
Oh my goodness, yes. He went right through the yard.
Huh.
But anyway, it was Wysaibo was the Indian name for river, and it was on the banks of the North River. If you went in the road by the Hatch Mill, and continued through the fields and past the Hatch houses and over the hill, and up on the very top of the hill was Camp Wysaibo. And it was a wonderful Girl Scout camp. And most of us of that era that lived here year-round went to Camp Wysaibo in the summer. And the teachers or the counselors that we had were wonderful people. They were Marshfield people, and they had special interests. Some of them were interested in birding, and others in swimming, and so we met a lot of the doers and shakers of the town through our love of Girl Scouting and Girl Scout camp. So,
did your brother go to the equivalent Boy Scout camp?
What?
Did your brother go to the equivalent Boy Scout camp?
Was there a Boy Scout? Boy Scout camp was mostly down in Plymouth Woods. We didn't have a Boy Scout camp here, but we had the Plymouth Woods, and we went on from Camp Saibo to go to the overnight scout camps down in the Plymouth Woods, which I went to every one of them. Homesick, I'd be terribly homesick. Even though my home was up the street practically. But once that was over, we made, it's what they're telling you today on television about this awful thing that's going on down in Texas with a camp, but they tell you that you make lifelong friendships in a situation like that. We'd swim in the river, and Tracy Hatch taught us girls how to swim. Some of the girls that didn't know how, and we had arts and crafts, and we did the things that are done on the Girl Scout level at a summer camp. It was just a wonderful experience. So that was what was going on more in the woods of Marshfield, less of the beaches.
Well, you talked about the fact that Marshfield Hills was very segregated.
Yes, oh yes.
It had its own identity.
Yes.
The rest of Marshfield.
Yes, I think we
that
did.
Seems to be the beach community versus the Marshfield Hills woods / river community.
Yes,
I think that's true.
right. But
except I will add something at this point. There was a nudist camp down there, and of course my family was really, my grandfather was a deacon of the First Baptist Church over here, and of course I never heard anything but bad things about the nudist colony. Sort of overshadowed the Girl Scout camp, because I believe she was involved also.
oh, Betty Hatch, definitely.
Betty Hatch was, yeah.
Betty Hatch was one of my parents' good friends. Not that they did skinny dipping, but anyway, my father had a boat, so we swam a lot off the boat. And she always, Betty Hatch and Tracy, they always went in nude.
So that's why you didn't take a boat downriver or upriver during the summertime, because of there were plenty of Baptists around here. So
right.
It was sort of off duty for anyone with a boat. If you went up there, you were, pegged as something else, I guess. But that was the big news back in those days. But that disappeared when the Hatches disappeared. I guess the nudist camp was over.
When they were.
When they disappeared, died. I don't know how long the nudist camp ran, but it was here when I was here.
Mm-hmm.
So I came in back in 1954, so it was still going in 54.
And where was this, in North Marshfield?
It was North Marshfield. North Marshfield, right up behind the Hatch Mill. If you took that driveway that leads into the Red House and went on beyond the Red House over a series of little islands till you got to the banks of the river. And we had a lot of fun in the river. We not only swam, we went on boats, and we went up camping overnight and so forth.
You caught your turtles?
Yeah, and caught turtles. Yes, I got into a turtles last time. Well, we all love turtles, but especially my brother, who was really deeply into animals and bird life and wild things. Well, the woodland lore.
What was your brother's name?
His name was, we called him Chomey, but his name was Chisholm, really, which was my mother's maiden name, and straight over from Scotland. It takes us full circle from the Mayflower to Scotland. The beginnings.
So besides Girl Scout camps and nudist colonies
Yeah.
in Marshfield, is there anything else you want to mention before we head into your professional?
No, I don't think so.
Is there anything else? I don't know. I didn't know whether I had mentioned earlier that my grandfather, Hager, was, well, put together or wrote the 1940 history of the town, the red volume.
No, you hadn't mentioned that.
We call it the red volume, but that was done under the direction of my grandmother, my grandfather, but with a committee that some people wrote about one aspect of the town history, and other people spoke of their particular place of interest. So I wanted to mention that. Let's see, where do we want to go?
That was probably one of the most important histories that we have in town, because it covered many different aspects that Lysander Richards, who wrote another early history, he didn't cover anything really about genealogies. Lysander Richards, actually, it was sort of a money-making project for him. He was I guess, a professor somewhere, or he thought he was a professor anyway.
I think he was.
He actually has quite a few mistakes in Lysander histories, 2 volumes. We as historians always question his work because it's not certainly far from perfect. But he covered the genealogies of families, but many families paid to be in the book. So it was a very different type of history book. The Hager history covered all sorts of things from the very beginnings of the town right up to the 1940s, right up to that particular moment, I guess, 44, 45. So that's a very important history. Then we had actually the earliest history of Marshfield was a woman by the name of
You're thinking of Thomas.
Marsha Thomas. She wrote 2 histories. One was published first. She turned around and wrote another one in the next year, 1950 or 1855, and that's the one we think of mostly today. The second one, I believe. Which was a fairly good history of Marshfield. She caught many things at that particular time in the development of the town, which no one else had really decided they were going to even talk about or publish. And she did a fairly decent job. There's a lot of genealogy in the book also. That was the first history of Marshfield that we're aware of anyway. Then along came Lysander Richards with his money-making scheme in the 1918, I think the date on that is, what is it, 1890 something?
I guess so, I don't.
Or is it no, it's in the early 1900s, I guess.
Around 1900.
Yeah. And there are many other Marshfield histories. For instance, Davis had a part in the Plymouth County book that he put together in the I think it was 1850s or 60s. which is a short and brief history of the town of Marshfield. So I guess you could really say that he was one of the earliest, along with Marcia Thomas. She, of course, was related to the Thomas family of Marshfield, which actually settled on where Daniel Webster later came to live. And the Thomas family was a very well-to-do family from England who settled here in the 1640s.
1640s.
50s?
1640.
40s. I think around 40s.
Right.
Yeah, 1640s. And the Thomas family had 2 houses there on the estate. The first house we've never really been able to identify. It was called the Eagle's Nest, and we've never been able to find any way of establishing exactly where it was. We presume it was on the peninsula of land in the Green Harbor Marsh, right there where Webster settled later. And the house, whatever happened to the first house, we think it fell down. It sort of disintegrated under the hands of Nathaniel Ray Thomas, who built the second house in the 1870s. 1873, I believe he was able to move into it after he married Sarah Deering Thomas.
I'm sorry, 1873 or
18, I'm sorry, I said 18, 19. But both Cynthia and I are related to the Thomas
17?
family. What?
Would it be 17?
No, it was 1773. He married her in the 1760s. And finally, the old house fell apart. So there were people there, one of the Winslows that lived there that had come down here from, because of the revolution in Boston, she fell through the floor, second floor of the house, because it was so decrepit, she said.
So that was Sarah or Anna Green Winslow, the mother.
Yeah.
No,
Wait a
no,
minute.
Marcia Thomas.
It was her mother that. No, it wasn't her mother.
No.
It was her friend or cousin.
It wasn't even. That's the other Thomas line.
Yeah, she actually married a Winslow, not the Winslow family of Marshfield, but their relative that lived in Boston, Josiah. She was married to Josiah. That's it, Josiah Winslow. And because of the revolution in Boston, she had come down to stay with Sarah Deering Thomas. And in the meantime, she had 2 children, I believe, both that died in Marshfield. The little boy and Anna Green.
Wasn't Anna Green Winslow the daughter? Wasn't her
Yeah,
mother
she was.
named Anna
That was
Green
her
Winslow?
mother that fell
Yeah,
through
her
the
mother
floor.
Her mother was the one that fell
Was
through
a-
the
Yeah,
floor.
was a-
it was her mother.
Thomas estate.
Right.
I'm sorry
And
again.
they're a descendant of Josiah Winslow.
No,
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 Okay.
no, no.
Not
Josiah.
our Josiah Winslow, but the one in Boston.
Joshua.
Joshua. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was a fighter during the Revolution for the British in Canada. I believe he was in Canada most of the time. He was with the British Army, which made it very interesting because, of course, I believe he turned to be a patriot. She certainly was a patriot, I guess. We don't really know too much about her beliefs.
Anna's?
Anna
Yeah.
Green? We know quite a lot about Anna Green.
But not how she felt about the revolution. Her husband was a British Army soldier.
Yeah, I know, but
So that's a good question. Some more research could really be done on that family. We have reams of research here, but no one has really ever ever written a book about them.
So did her falling through the floor appear in her diary that you had transcribed
Yeah.
earlier?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's
It
in
does.
there.
It does come into the diary.
I believe
If
it
you
was
read
her
the
leg
diary.
that was injured.
Mm.
So going back to, you know, your professional careers as historians.
What did you study in college?
Well, I studied history. I majored in history, and I went to Mount Holyoke College. I had to get that in.
That's fine.
Anyway, and I like to think about the growth of Marshfield. I like to think of it as what it looked like when the Pilgrims stepped ashore in Plymouth. What did it look like, and how did you experience it? And then I like to think of what it was like to establish a family in what they thought of was the wilderness, but there were a lot of Indians around about. So the Indian history has to be taken into account. And we got interested in the trails, the early paths that connected the little settlements that began to crop up here and there on this beautiful piece of land. Can you imagine stepping ashore when there wasn't any? You didn't have to pay any tariffs, and you, and then how they built their little houses and how it all moved on into they had to make a living at it, so they had to build their little mills and they had to build their ships, and so it all led to here was the big white pines that could serve as masts on the ships, and so that the vegetation of the raw materials were here to be used and were used, and in time you had a lot of villages that centered on either the industry that had arisen in that particular area, or and the other important thing were the churches, and they were the center area, the centerpiece of every little village. You had a First Baptist church in one area of Marshfield, and then along came a Second Baptist church. So you had this growing patchwork quilt of activities that they all had to do to get along in this part of the world at that time. And pretty soon, all the little tributaries of the rivers that run through Marshfield were just very unusual town in having 3 rivers, all of which became important for the water power that they needed to build the ships and build their houses. And pretty soon those industries, and this was very true particularly of Marshfield, because it had the little Ford mill here on what we call the little park there that they've now taken, where the mill site is up here, the junction of 3A and 139.
Veterans Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like to see it growing because later on, some of the most, well, a lot of American industry started right here in Marshfield. And certainly on the South Shore, the larger area, it's the watershed of the Taunton River, or of the Nemasket River, or every little brook and every river was valuable to them because of the water power. But so today, we're all connected by these branches of these rivers and of the potential for the mercantile growth of this area. So now, today, the landscape is still dotted with those important structures. Now we're building so fast, we're losing the sense of network or the sense of community, and I think that's too bad. But time marches on, and that's what happens. But I like to think of it. So when we first kind of got turned on to history, was kind of through the little network of paths that led from one little village to the next little village. And in time, all those little trails, we'll call them Indian trails, and many of them did use the old Indian ways of getting from one place to another. But as time went on, it all became the exciting place that we live in today. But we began searching out these paths or trails, and we came upon this little black box of things that had belonged to Betty's aunt, Lizzie, and she had done a lot of research on the exact location of the so-called, we call it the Pilgrim Trail, but it was for them the Green Harbor Path. The Green Harbor Path. And it led up from the Pilgrims in Plymouth, up through Duxbury and Marshfield, and it was one of their main routes. And those little paths, if you go and walk on them, and you can walk where these early settlers walked. You can walk in their footsteps and imagine what it was like when the Mayflower did indeed land upon this stern and rock-bound coast, as they call it. So, and then that brings up, if you get into where the little paths led to, then you get into the things they were doing, and the activity that their family might have been shipbuilders, or they might have been builders of one sort or another. So this all became this base upon when we all walk around on these very trails, even today. So that was one thing that we did when we started the book.
The lectures.
Yeah, I remember we went down. We said we've got to get a feel for the land on which they trod. So we went down, and we went down to the original site where where Winslow built his first house. Not not our house, but the one down on the edge of the marsh. And let me see.
So when he came
Oh,
up
yeah.
to Marshfield in
That's right.
1636, he saw the potential of living here. He had the marsh on one side, and it was very, there was a lot of protection to where he finally built his house, because the Indians would have had to go through the marsh to be able to get to him and to his house. So he thought there was a lot of farmland there, and it was outside of Plymouth proper, and he was interested in the expansion of the Plymouth colony. So in 1636, he came up here and built a very small house right across, almost directly across the area from the present Winslow house. So Cynthia and I decided when we had to write this book that we would go down there in order to get started. We were having a little bit of trouble saying, where should we begin this? How should we begin? Are we ready to begin it? Well, we didn't have much time to think about it, because the committee said to Cynthia, this has to be done by 1990, a celebration of the town. So we went down there and we spent an afternoon walking around these two wonderful old cellar halls that you could see with the bricks spattered around the area there. It's about where the Winslow School is today. It's about, I would say, about 150 feet into the brushy woods. It's not far from the school site. And that gave us enough inspiration to begin work on it immediately. So that's how we started.
So the book you're referring to is your book, Marshfield, the
Yeah.
Town of Villages.
Yeah.
And that was apparently, it was a commission by the town for the 1990 anniversary of
Yeah.
the town.
It was 350th or 70th. 70,
No, it was.
whichever.
So how did you end up in the position where the town asked you to write that book, or you brought that idea to the town?
Well, by that time I was teaching, running courses on Marshfield history. My grandfather's book was well known, so it was sort of known that we had writers in the family, and I was very involved. Not only that, we were lecturing to not only Marshfield people, but to the surrounding towns, even as far as northern New England. So anyway, you ask why.
Well, you were
Did you have an
teaching
answer
at
to that?
Bridgewater and college, and
Mhm.
at that time, and so it was quite normal for them to ask her if she'd be willing to do it. And so that's how I became involved in the work on the book, the research that went into it. We had sort of always felt that we would like to write a book about Marshfield, but it just took that push. And it was Dick Martinez that came to Cynthia and said to her, would you like to do this? And she said, yes. And I think I nearly fell over, but it came to fruition. And that's how it all began. But we always thought in our own minds, one day this part of our mind has got to go into a book somewhere. We'll save this bit of information that we have and bring it out in a book someday. And although Cynthia had written a book a small book on Edward Winslow, and many books, she had gotten her master's at Bridgewater State College, and had another book on I guess for her master's degree, on the development of Plymouth Colony. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that book was also published. So we pretty much knew that she could write the book. I'm not a writer. I'm more of a research person. And I enjoyed the research, but she's the real writer.
Well, we did the research all together.
Yeah. Well, she does research also, so I'm claiming just my little role in research.
No, you're a good researcher.
So that's how we began the book, and then we chose to write the book in the Ventress Library, which we did. It took us perhaps just one winter, one fall and one winter before it was published the next year to get this done and out, and which was a Herculean job, but we worked hard at it, and we did all the work ourselves as far as putting together the book. There were a few people that gave various articles and things they were experts in, but the majority of it was written right there in the library. Cynthia would go home at night and still continue on working.
I'd stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning.
Pulling it all together. But generally speaking, there wasn't much rewriting to do. I mean, she just sat down, and it was her idea, Marshfield Villages, the villages of Marshfield, because we had no idea how it was going to be done in the beginning. How would you do this? So then she said one day it came to her that there were 9 villages.
Yeah, something like that.
In Marshfield. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it should be done, starting with the oldest part of Marshfield and developing it as it developed. So developed the villages. And that was a wonderful way to go about it, because we could handle that with just the way it fell together was wonderful. It was sort of a miracle.
And Cynthia, you provided a lot of the photography and map illustrations for the book.
Oh yeah, I did quite a number of them. I like to do maps.
Well, it was someone else in Marshfield here. He actually thought he was about to be the photographer for the book, but it became apparent soon that he was a very different type of a photographer. He was more interested in the business end of it, and we wanted to go ahead with the history part, including the photography should be related to the history of the town, not to the businesses in town. So Cynthia's work became more apparent as to the features that we were looking for. So he gradually faded out of existence, and even though maybe one of his pieces of photography was used in the book, and we had a great choice. I believe even the cover of the book that was thought to be something else, we didn't feel that way. We felt it should be something really related to Marshfield, and I mean to a specific history of Marshfield. That's how David Brigger's painting became the painting on the front of the book, which I always felt was an excellent front piece to the book. Then, of course, we used the maps on the front piece of the book of not the earliest map was of Marshfield, but not the 1690 map of the it. We used
We used all
the
whole
later
series.
maps of
the whole
Marshfield.
series of
When
maps.
did
Yeah.
you start drawing maps, Cynthia?
Excuse me, what?
When did you start drawing maps?
Well, I did. I did a map of my childhood memories in the woods that we played in up near our house.
Does that still exist?
Did you? It's on the wall of the historical society.
Oh, that's what it is?
John
Yes.
Alden.
That is?
Yeah.
What?
That's what that map is? I
Yeah.
knew it was you. I didn't know it was
Yeah.
your childhood memory.
Yes. And that I did years ago. But
We were so surprised when that appeared down at the Alden house as this huge blow up of this sketch that she did.
no, the sketch is in the historical society. The Alden house has my map of the Indian Pilgrim Trails, all on the wall.
Oh yes, that's right.
The whole wall is just that map.
Oh,
Yeah.
the published map.
The maps, the
You're talking
the
about
map
the
I did for
published
the
map
Plymouth,
that you did in
for the Plymouth tricentennial.
1770. That you were
19.
asked to do in 1970.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway,
That was by the
it's a fun
committee.
it's a fun journey when you get into local history.
So, when did you start your historical research of this area?
What
was that?
When did you start historical research of this area?
When did we start doing historical research of this area? Is that the question?
Like what year?
When we were born.
No, I guess I really got serious about writing some of it. 1960s.
Yeah, probably. Seriously.
What is your favorite aspect of historical research?
The map making.
Map making. Yeah, say that again.
What is your favorite aspect of historical research?
Oh, it's very exciting. It's like doing puzzles. You have to figure it out all. It's very exciting, and it builds and it builds. So you start in one little area of interest, like the Indian history, and then of course, what did they do and who did they talk to, and it just steps along, and you follow in their footsteps, and it's fun because then you'll be in a library somewhere or in a historical society, and they'll have some information that that is new to you. So you suddenly come upon something. It's like finding a new turtle.
I think actually to add a little bit to it, when I found that black box in my great aunt's
That's right.
material,
That was a turning point.
she was very interested in the old trail that passed by her house in the south of Marshfield here. Just below the Winslow house on Caswell Street was an old house that her family, or the Paulding family, which is my family too, my actually lived in, and they lived there for, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 generations. And she became very interested in this trail, and she teamed up with a man by the name of Henry Fish from Duxbury, who was he actually had been a mailman in Duxbury and become very interested in the trails that ran throughout town. And she and Henry Fish did a lot of research on finding where it went through the woods from Plymouth all the way up to her house. So that was what really triggered Cynthia and I's idea of how they got from Plymouth up to Marshfield was over this old Indian path. So we went to town to finish what she had never really finished, and we began working on it just back in the early 60s as a project that we were interested in. So we spent a few years traipsing through the woods to find the old trail in the woods, and which we found. Not only did we do research there, we did research in the courthouse in Plymouth. We did research with Henry Fish's material. We did research just visually walking through the woods to locate it, and it still can be seen today in various places in Marshfield. We could take you out there and find the old trail, but that was really the basis of our beginnings of, or at least I feel it was,
Certainly.
of really studying these trails. And we became known as the people that knew where this old trail was. So the research intrigued other people. And so other people would ask us to come and give a lecture because we knew where it walked. It actually traveled. And that was our real beginnings with Marshfield history, I guess, even though it's sort of embedded into us anyway because of our ancestors.
So
I'm another, just a word.
Go ahead.
I may have forgotten it by now. Oh, you asked me about college, something about college, and I will say that I had some wonderful professors at college that I just was lucky to get some very, very inspired history teachers, and I think that that's a very important. I'm thinking of you on the verge of your adventure with education, and education is so important. And if you are lucky enough to get some good professors, you never forget them. You never forget what their approach was. They turn you on. They give you a passion for learning. So there's my little thought for the day.
So tell me about the historical societies and your work with them.
The Historical Society, what?
Tell me about your historical societies, the historical societies and your work with them.
Well, you eventually became town historian, and then both of you on the historical commission and the historical society and Winslow Society, Winslow Association, and the Daniel Webster Estate.
We've done them all.
Oh, yes.
Simultaneously.
Well, actually, Cynthia became president of the Marshfield Historical Society. I became secretary, and for a number of years we stayed with that. And then in the late 1960s, she went on the Historical Commission, and I followed about 2 years later, I guess. And I served about 30, I think it was 32 years or something like that. And she went on to finish
I think it was 40 years. It's terrible to
Did you
say.
really?
Yes.
And actually, between the two of them, they were probably the most important years as far as our gathering information from various resources. We got to know more and more people that would always have a tale or always know something that we didn't know. So our vision became wider and our knowledge became greater, and we've known a lot of fascinating people, even here in Marshfield. Rosella Ames was one of them. That was one of the, speak about Girl Scout leaders. She was a great Girl Scout leader here in Marshfield. And she went on to become the first woman on the Marshfield Historical Commission. And she was a great inspiration to us in our early years.
So, what were some of the critical historical preservation projects you have been involved in?
Well, Hatch Mill was one of the earlier ones, and the preservation of the restoration of the school, the schoolhouse. That was an early one. I think. Which one?
We've worked on many preservation.
Yeah. Yeah, almost everything that came along in that period of 20 years, we really were working very closely with it all.
Was there a point in Marshfield where historical preservation became, like, I don't want to say important because that's not the word I'm looking for, but sort of
yeah, it
popular?
Did. It coincided
Yes.
with the growth, an intense growth in the interest in history, the general history of the United States. And I mean, things came alive. We've always thought that was because of the bicentennial.
Yes. 1976, the bicentennial of the country. That was a very important time for interest that was developing throughout the country of the preservation of the country, the towns, the information that people had. We had just wonderful people that became active with preserving the buildings in Marshfield. A lot of the preservation, I think the preservation of the properties in Marshfield by individual people has been a wonderful thing. A lot of people were inspired by the revolution to come and fix up an old house. Preservation took an active
it was
change.
Yeah, it was widespread.
Yeah.
The whole country had a kind of an awakening about the importance of history.
Preservation of materials, preservation of things, artifacts, everything was influenced by the 1976 celebration. But speaking of that, I think we've perhaps worked during our lifetime. We've been very fortunate of having all this happen. I mean, today it discourages both of us very much, the state of where this country is. Because
we're not alone.
Yes.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. We won't get into that so much, but we've been very happy to have been a part of it. What do you say?
Squirrel got into the bird feeder.
Oh, he did. He got in there.
Well, it's nice. We saw the fox.
Oh, yes.
He was listening to our words of wisdom.
Yes.
Um,
So actually, one of the things that I did in the 1990s, I became part of a group that was hired to help develop the Historical Commission of Hanover, and I worked for a whole year putting together a historical commission for them. I believe that's one of the things that in 1976 that that inspired a lot of towns to develop a historical commission. And I think here in Marshfield, we've done a wonderful job marking sites, bringing the history of the area alive to people. Cynthia's taught many courses to the teachers in Marshfield for increment, and we went into, you know, well, I shouldn't say we went into, we developed lots of programs for them to use in the school system. We've been very fortunate to really sort of inspire people to become more interested in history and bring it to the students. There were, for instance, she taught a class for the children or boys in high school. Tell them about your class in high school, the project
There was a government.
enterprise.
There was a government program.
Yes.
That put money into the schools to help them to become more interested in learning and being in school. It was called Project Enterprise, and they asked me if I would come in and teach a course in Marshfield history. And of course, they were just fascinated because I think, unfortunately, history can have a bad name, and it can be, oh, we don't want to take that. It's too full of dates and people, you know, generals and warfare and so forth. And it's kind of dull. And it can be dull with a dull teacher. So anyway, my theory was that if you brought it down to the local level, instead of talking about the Battle of Gettysburg, way over there somewhere, if you what was going on in Marshfield, right where we are today. So at the end of that semester at school, there was this boy that came up to me and he said, "You know, Mrs. Krusell, I've never had any interest in school. It's school itself, much less history. But I think this, I just love that history course." So there it is. There it is in a nutshell.
Well, we were a little skeptical when she was asked to do this because I ran the machine. We had actually we had all these photographs of what do you call those that we use? Slides of Marshfield, of all the historical places in town where things took place. They were all on. It was all done with slides. Cynthia would lecture. I would shoot the slides on the screen. We had to get these all together, which we had over a period of years, developed various, maybe at least 15 different lectures that we could give to people, shipbuilding, the early development of the town, various phases of the development of Marshfield. So we were told that these were problem kids in school, and they were. They were kids that could not be integrated, boys, all boys, integrated into the Marshfield school system. So we thought, my goodness, this may be kind of dangerous. People told us how terrible these boys were. Well, I can tell you, by the time we finished, there wasn't a kid in that class that ever spoke out, that ever said anything. They were just fascinated by by what was under their own feet. We had a marvelous time with them. We took them on bus tours. It was one of we had 2 or 3 various bus tours around town. They'd get on there disheveled and, looking like they didn't want to go to school. But by the time we finished, it was marvelous. It was one of the high points. I think you took
That
the
was
course,
fun.
you taught it for 3 years, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, over and over again. So it was marvelous.
What are some of the most interesting or surprising things you've learned while researching the town's history?
Well, that was one of them.
That's true.
Oh, there were so many things. Very often, people will buy a house in Marshfield. This is one of the things I love. They'll buy a house in Marshfield. They don't know why they came here. One of them is one of our former board members. They bought a house in Marshfield. I had no idea why they bought this house in Marshfield, except they loved it. And people will come here 8 generations later, or 10 generations, or 14 generations later, ended up in a house their ancestors had owned, even though they lived in California. And the people who bought the house, and they'll do a genealogy on the house, or we'll do a genealogy for them. We'll find out their ancestors lived in the house at one point. So that is always a fascinating thing. Can you think of other things that?
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's the one I've what's her name? Brant. You know.
Shannon.
Oh, a board member there that's no longer on the.
Shannon.
Yeah,
Shannon.
she arrived here in Marshfield. Never knew that she was related until she did the genealogy to the branches that settled Branches Island in the 1630s. I've never known a branch person in my life, family person, but she from California ends up with that ancestor. So I think it's always fascinating what draws people to something.
That is true.
It's the same with history. I mean, Cynthia and I have had many experiences why we never knew that this was something we should have known about. It was very near and dear to us, but my goodness, it has a reason. So it's always fascinating.
So Cynthia, what's the most interesting thing you've ever learned about Marshfield Hills?
Interesting thing about Marshfield Hills.
Or oddest?
I mean, some new piece of information that
Yes.
I hadn't known before.
Well, she's got ancestors up there, and she didn't know it years before she moved here. I don't think her parents knew it when they moved here. The little family.
Yeah.
That's interesting. At least I think.
I have an uncle who turned out to be very interesting, more so than I might have known at the time. His name is Joe Hager, and he became very active under the presidency of William Howard Taft, and Joey. We call my uncle Joey, and he worked with Taft. Although I might say that since then we've discovered it wasn't the William Howard Taft, but his cousin, and they're related. And I didn't know anything about this. But when we were growing up, we had a place we used to all refer to. It was called Taft's Camp, and we go up there and have picnics and whatnot. But I never knew anything about about it. And then one day, how did I find out about it? I can't remember now. But it opened up my uncle to me, that he had that interest. And well, I knew he was he was the first environmental head of the environmental department for the government in Washington. I never knew that, and I knew him very well. But he had done all that in his earlier life before he knew me.
So
I used to.
task camp was where? Is that in Marshfield or is that somewhere else?
It's in Marshfield. It's right up at the top of Carolina Hill.
It's the highest point in Marshfield.
That's right.
242 feet or something like that.
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember. Don't know.
Well, it was
My uncle,
your grandfather,
Joey.
who wanted to own the highest point in Marshfield, so he did.
Well, when he came here in the 1920s, Marshfield was just a clean slate to be written upon.
Sort of repeating the Pilgrims.
Yes.
Pilgrims had a clean slate, as did your grandfather.
Mm-hmm. I can't think of anything else in Marshfield Hills that was.
Well, we probably
specifically.
will.
We're gonna close up, so anything else you'd like to say?
But do we have any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
I'm going for like an hour and 20 minutes, so.
An hour and 20 minutes, really?
No, you've gone an hour and 20